Oh yes, we're back. Hello folks. We're off back home. And that was a bit of a slippery start there, wasn't it? And while we travel along this snowy road, I thought we'd have a little story. Now, for those that don't want to listen to the story, of course, you can just enjoy the ride home. And if you don't want to do either of those things, just skip on and have a look at somebody else's video that they've probably done in sunshine. Probably from the other side of the world, of course, or Spain. It's still always quite nice going back this way, isn't it? Lovely. Now the story, yes. I did mention when we were in the hangar last that I hadn't really spoken about this this Triumph 500 that I had, which was the unit construction 500. Now this all began because I was riding my Royal Enfield 250 Crusader, which I'd decided needed its front end modifying, and it was never quite the same after that, I have to say. And for me, it used to vibrate rather, and it used to make my I was okay, but I did fit some rear set footrests to it and stuff like that, and swept back exhaust, and a genuine Gold Star silencer which I'd got from someone who unfortunately for some reason modified it. They cut, and this is awful, they cut a sort of an angle on the tailpipe of it, and it looked absolutely dreadful. So I had to hacksaw that off to make it a square end, because that made it shorter, and it just didn't look quite right. But it did twitter just like the genuine Gold Star silencer on a Gold Star. So must have had a fair bit of valve overlap, as we call it, on in the engine. So some of you won't know what I'm on about there, but anyway, I won't explain it. You can look it up. We'll carry along this bit of road now. So yes, I'd decided that the Crusader Sports, especially for when I had these rear set footrests fitted, it used to make my feet go numb after about, it was really only about 10 miles. The vibration was of such a high frequency, it made my feet go numb. So I decided to pass it on to a young lad who unfortunately didn't realise you had to put oil in it, and he seized the thing up. And at that time I was an apprentice. I was 17 and a half to 18, and I was working with actually some older chaps that I had known for a couple of years. Before I was even an apprentice, they were actually working there, and they were in a more senior role, and in the fitting job. And one of them, Terry Murphy, he had suffered polio as a child. Do you remember the dreadful polio thing? Some of you will do. And that left his leg a little bit difficult to walk. Very nice man, and he had this Triumph 21, it was called, which is unit construction 350 Triumph Twin, and he got hold of this. It had rather a nasty engine failure. On those Triumphs, the feed to the main bearing and the big ends was through a plain bush on the timing side. I realise this is all a bit technical for some of you, and so skip all this bit if you want. But what that meant was he had to have the crankshaft reground and an oversized bush put in, and he decided to take the whole thing apart, take off the bathtub, as it was nicknamed, at the back, which was a big mudguard, enclosed a lot of the back end of the thing. And the Triumph 21, as its name probably describes it, was intended for 21-year-olds. I think that was the idea anyway, Triumph's idea. And it was quite a popular bike. It wasn't terribly fast. I mean, it was. I mean, if you think 80 miles an hour on a motorcycle was pretty fast. And they're quite nice little machines with that bathtub removed. So anyway, took all that off. But he also decided he'd start to polish things up in the engine. So he got the rockers and polished all those up. Bearing in mind he was working in an engineering factory, he had access to quite a few machines. It didn't take him too long. And put high compression pistons in. So it was like a Triumph Targa 90, so it was capable of 90 miles an hour. And he also fitted, he removed the dual seat, which was, I think, torn, and he made himself a single seat for it. And machine, I suppose today you would call it a bobber. But we didn't call things by those names then. We weren't influenced too much by the Americans at that stage. So anyway, he had this bike, but he got part way through it, and the reason he was doing all this was because he'd had an unfortunate relationship with a woman, and she'd thrown him over, and so he decided to do this to sort of take his mind off it. Well, of course, someone else came along, another young woman came along, and the bike went onto the back burner, as we say. So when I came along the scene and was, sort of chatting about this Crusader that I was a bit fed up with, he said, "Well, I've got this 21, which I was doing up. You can have it for £25 if you want. It's all in bits." So of course, the very word "all in bits" really appealed to me, especially. It always does. And so I said, "Well, all right then. Yeah, I'll sell the Crusader and I'll take it on." So anyway, he let me have all the bits before I'd sold the Crusader, and sold the Crusader, and there it was. It was in Mum and Dad's conservatory, little lean-to conservatory they had, and I started to look at all the parts, and he hadn't fitted different cams to it, but I decided, yes, you may remember, some of you, that the pre-unit Triumphs, you could buy a high-performance camshaft for those. It was called the E3134. Now, how nerdy is that I can remember that number? I can't remember the number of the high-performance cams for the unit construction engines. That was a different number. It was a 4 number, E4 something or other. But 4189? Possibly. So anyway, all of these cams, and started to assemble it. I had to get it had exhaust pipes, but it didn't have silencers. It hadn't got as far as that. And at the time, there were a lot of pattern silencers on the market, as there are now, I suppose. And but of course, I didn't have a lot of money, so I had to go for cheap ones, and I went for these cheap Gold Star pattern silencers. Well, silencer is a bit of a misnomer here. They weren't a silencer at all. In fact, I think they made the exhaust louder. They were absolutely awful. Incredibly loud. But, they did look the part. I stuck them on. The valves were pretty awful, and the plating probably wasn't very good, but I wasn't going to have it that long, probably. So, yes, we stuck all that on. Assembled it all. And I do remember starting up without any exhaust pipes at all on it. In Mum and Dad's conservatory, of course, still, and started it up, and it made a most peculiar noise without any exhaust pipes on at all, and you could actually see the flames around the valves, which really surprised me. I don't know why it should surprise me. I mean, it's an internal combustion engine. There's bound to be flames in it as the fuel burns. So that was quite exciting. The things we do. Oh, well, the rear tyre, not having much money, I put the same rear tyre on that it came with, and it had, at some point the suspension must have gone down to the bottom of the stops, and there was a part on the frame which stuck down, and that had gone into the tyre and made a groove all the way around it. But I looked at that, I was like, "Oh no, that'd be all right. never do that today, but anyway, things we do. So came the day that took it out for its first run, and it was actually rather nice. A very small carb restaurant, as I recall, 7/8 inch Amel monoblock, the very smallest monoblock I think that they did. But it only did about 80, and the acceleration was quite good though. And it was that single seat on it was quite comfortable, and it did look a little bit different. But the thing that wasn't of much use was the fact we used to ride to Brands Hatch and Liddon Hill and race meetings in the south of England, and very often my friends, their bike was off the road or something like that, and are you going to Brands Hatch, Pete? So I said, oh, yeah, I'm going. Oh, I said, can I come too? On the back, and because they didn't have there was no dual seat for them to sit on, so they had to sit on part of the frame and part of the back end of this little single seat. Can you imagine it today? We're talking about 1967 here, and so yes, off we'd go, and of course with these blinking Gold Star silencers, the noise was horrendous if you were nipping along at 70 or 70 plus, as we did in those days, as I did, and it was a lovely run up to Brands Hatch from Portsmouth. You went round the Devil's Punch Bowl and for that way. And I do remember once seeing an airship, or not an airship I suppose it was there were people parachuting out of this thing across Devil's Punch Bowl, which is if anyone knows the Devil's Punch Bowl, it's a lovely wooded area set in a real bowl, and it was a lovely sunny morning, and there were these parachutists coming down from this air balloon thing. And, you know, I've got that image in my head, and of course with the passage of time these things become romanticised, don't they? They do for me, and I can still see that scene in my head. I can play it back now as I'm talking to you on this ride. It was just one of those events that is once in a lifetime. I can't ever imagine seeing that again, but it's in my head. So that's a real pleasure actually. I've got one of those sort of brains that is quite photographic. But moving on, so yes, we rode up to Brands Hatch all across these race meetings, as I say, and this says Triumph, and it used to run very nicely. There were a few things I'd changed on it. I did fitted out all the guards because it'd taken the guards were missing, and the headlamp nacelle, that I had to do something with that. I think I fitted BSA Bantam ears which attached to hold the headlamp. I had to get a separate headlamp for that. But it came to the point I thought I need a 500 really. Now I thought to myself, well, why not just get barrels and head from a 500. Is there anyone that I know that's got any spare? Well, all my friends worked in the dockyard, Royal Naval Dockyard in Portsmouth, and they always knew someone who had something. And anyway, there were a couple of lads. They were called the Twins. Now, they weren't identical twins, which is to me quite peculiar. Well, that over there, that's the River Bella, and that's a lovely little bit of river there is. So carry on anyway. Yeah, they're called the Twins. One of them was very tall with dark hair and quite well built, and the other one was much slighter with much fairer hair, and yet they were called the Twins. There we go. And they were twins, and they had both motorcyclists, and they had barrels and head from a 500. I don't know why they had them. Anyway, they did, and so I walked around, bought these, took them home, and the reason for doing that as well was the fact that I'd actually blown up the 350 engine. Now, How it came about, I'm not sure, but what happened was I was out for a ride and there was a loud noise from the bottom end of the engine, and then a sudden load of blue smoke from both the exhausts, and the big ends had gone. Well, I was about 30 miles from home, so I limped home with this oil haze and smoke behind me and this dreadful noise from the bottom of the engine. Got it home, and when I actually came to strip it down, it was in a dreadful mess. The big ends had completely gone. That main plain timing side bush on the main bearing, that had completely disintegrated, and the connecting rods, which were steel on that 350, steel connecting rods, they'd gone completely blue, so the heat must have been enormous. But amazing, I got it home. So that was really one of the reasons why I decided I had to do something about the engine and make it into a 500. So I'd quite forgotten that. So that meant I had to have a new crankshaft, or exchange crankshaft, and connecting rods, and build it into a 500, which I duly did. I did have to go over to Gosport, which was on the other side of Portsmouth Harbour, so I didn't have a car in those days, of course, so I had to do it on the bus and walk. And these crankshafts, they were really heavy. Crankshafts and flywheels are really heavy things, so I had it in this bag and I walked all the way up from the ferry up to the shop over in Gosport with this the old flywheel and collect the new one. Anyway, walk back. Was it absolutely exhausted when I got back? As one might imagine. A very long arm. So yes, I put it all together, and then I needed a bigger carburettor. Now, in the motorcycle news, people used to advertise bits and pieces, and there was someone in Birmingham that was selling brand new Amor monoblock carburetors, inch and 3/16 ones. So I bought one of these and stuck it on and jetted it as near as I could imagine, but it was far too large, really. But it did give a fair turn of speed on that Triumph. But what had caused this catastrophe in the 350 engine, I wasn't sure. So I replaced the oil pump, checked all the oil ways, and I did everything I could imagine that it could possibly. It was obviously an oil failure somewhere or other in the line from the oil tank. I cleaned all the oil tank out again. I'd done that already. So did all that and fitted a dual seat, and yes, it was quite nippy, that 500. I didn't re-gear it. I don't know why I didn't gear it by the gearbox sprocket and gear it the same as the 500. It was still geared as the 350, so it's a bit under-geared. But it used to do about 100. I can't imagine riding a motorcycle at 100 miles an hour now, especially one of these. It did used to bounce around a lot. The rear suspension wasn't much good, and always the front suspension, to be honest, and the brakes were terrible. I don't really want to go back to those days. So yes, so I had that for quite a while. But actually, when I say quite a while, it's probably only about just a few months in reality, because when you're young, time seems to sort of telescope its way together, and what seems like a long time it really is probably only just a few months. So yes, I rode that bike, and it seemed to be running very nicely. It did tend to 8-stroke a bit, and I do remember, and this came about because of all this snow we've had. I remember that I was at college on a Thursday, it was, and I used to go to college, and I used to come home for lunch. It was about 5 miles to get back home, so I just had time to get home, have something to eat, and get back to college again. But we had heavy snowfall. I was at home and I saw the snow coming down. It laid about 1.5 inches thick. So I had to get back to college. So I actually rode back along this thick snow. And that's the only time I've actually ridden on deep snow, but it was fresh snow, and that's a very different kettle of fish, riding on fresh snow, than snow that's then refrozen overnight. So yeah, it was quite exciting. I got there back. That's right. It started to freeze in the evening, so that wasn't quite so nice coming back. But anyway, did it, and it's all good experience anyway, isn't it? So what happened to that Triumph in the end? Well, I sold it to my friend John. He was looking out for a nice bike, he said, and he said, I like the look of your Triumph, so I sold it to him. £50 I think I got for it. And he had it for about 18 months, but exactly the same thing happened again. It blew its bottom end out, and he couldn't understand it either. He said it's probably because I over-revs it. Over-revs it, Pete, he said. I said, well, I'd replaced absolutely everything. I mean, what could it be? And I know later on, when they brought out the Triumph Daytona 500, which actually won the Daytona race in the United States, Bucky Elmore, as I recall, that they changed that timing side bearing to a roller bearing, and improved the oil feed to the bottom end. So I suspect there was a fatal flaw, that if you over rev the things, then the oil couldn't keep up to the big ends. So that's the story anyway of that 500. It's made me think about changing things like exhaust pipes and silencers. So I've not done it since, and I certainly won't be doing it on my Royal Enfield Hunters. I love the sound of those. The standard engine, it's just perfect for me. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little story, and you can join me for another ride. I hope we're going to get a bit of riding in before Christmas. It doesn't look much like it at the moment. It's absolutely pouring with rain here as I do this, and but we'll see you possibly for a little story before Christmas. But if not, then, as I say, when I was in the hangar, have a great Christmas, and I look forward to seeing you in the new year. See you then. Bye.